Today, I had the honor of speaking with Sheleana Aiyana, author of Becoming the One and founder of Rising Woman, a growing community of more than 3 million readers. I felt her grace while listening to her book and while we shared this hour-long podcast recording. Her training and immersion in couples facilitation, inherited family trauma, conscious relationship, and somatic healing inform her holistic approach to seeing relationship as a spiritual path. The practices in her book and her online workshops help us to overcome childhood trauma, learn from past painful relationships, ground us in nature, and awaken us to our spiritual potential. Sheleana says, "I am not an influencer, a spiritual guru, or an expert. I am a guide, and I take great care in this work I'm so privileged to do." I hope our conversation today sparks new insight and infuses more grace and beauty into your life. Enjoy. Welcome to Let's Talk Love, the podcast that brings you real talk, fresh ideas, and expert insights every week. Our guests are the most trusted voices in love and relationships, and they're here for you with tools, information, and friendly advice to help you expand the ways you love, relate, and communicate. We tackle the big questions, not shying away from the complex, the messy, the awkward, and the joyful parts of relationships. I'm your host, Robin Ducharme. Now, let's talk love. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of Let's Talk Love. I'm so excited to have our beautiful guest, Sheleana Aiyana. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did indeed. Thank you.
Oh, you have such a beautiful name. You really, really do. And I feel blessed to share this hour with you on our podcast, talking about the work that you're doing in this world, which is quite profound. And I'm listening to your book. I have listened to your book, and it's a very powerful message and teachings. And I love that you're narrating it, right? Your voice is so soothing and full of grace. And anyways, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me. And funny fact about when I recorded that audiobook, the second day was my second day of having morning sickness hit me while we were in LA traveling. And
Really?
So I'm very proud of myself for recording that audiobook because I was taking a lot of puke breaks.
So you were pregnant with Soraya at the time?
I was. We had conceived
Wow.
her in Mexico, and then we flew over to LA to do a bit of media for my book, record my audiobook, and see some family. And the day after we got there, it was confirmed that I was pregnant with her. And we had a few days of no morning sickness, and I was like, I'm not going to have any. And then on day 2 of recording my audiobook, I woke up quite sick. And I powered through, though. And the day after I completed it, it all really fell apart. So it was just perfect timing. Everything was so perfect with this book.
It was meant to be. So
Yeah.
I have a question about your pregnancy. Did you, because so your daughter's middle name is Maya, and my first daughter is Maya.
Yeah.
And I knew well before it was confirmed on, through my test that I was pregnant. I had this, it was quite an incredible, magical feeling in my womb that I felt. And I said to because I was working at the time in Vancouver, and I said to one of my colleagues, I was like, I'm pregnant. And it had only been, I think I was only pregnant for a week at that time. But I really felt her moving and growing in me, even though obviously scientifically it would be the cells coming together, right? Did you have that sense with Soraya?
I did. Yeah. We did quite an interesting preconception path as well. Spiritually, I did a lot of ancestral clearing work, and I did a ceremony to call her spirit in, which some people will think sounds very kooky, but it was really profound for me. And it was under a full moon many months before I actually conceived her. And so that's actually when I received her name. Excuse me. But once we actually conceived her, I felt her enter in a spirit
Yes.
sense, because I had been communicating with her all along. And so when she finally
Oh my
came,
gosh.
I knew. And I remember waking up at 4 a.m. every morning. That was one of the first physical signs. So I just was waking up every morning at 4 a.m. and walking down to the ocean, because we were in a little casita in Mexico. And I would just go and sing medicine songs to the moon. And I could feel this spirit baby very, very close. And I was like, please actually be here. You know, I hope this is real. You know, I hope you're actually here. And I would sing to her. And then I didn't actually test, because we had been trying for a little while and it was getting me very in my head. And so this, interestingly, the only time that I was actually pregnant was when I just decided to not test at all until it was quite obvious. And then when we went to LA for my book, I finally was like, okay, I'm going to take a test. And here she was.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell us about, so in your bio, you, I'm going to read a few things that are that describe what's going on with your work in the world. You're a spiritual counselor. You're the founder of Rising Woman, a growing community of more than 3 million readers. That is just really so incredible, Sheleana, that you've been in, and your community is growing. And so obviously you have a very grand soul purpose in this world. That's the way I see it. You're helping a lot of women. Would you say that it's mostly women?
Yeah, it's mostly women. There is a small
people.
percentage of men for sure, but mostly women,
Yeah.
obviously, given the name. But I do really enjoy working with men as well. And I find more and more
Yes.
as my work matures, I get more men entering my programs too, even just from my husband, because he does a lot of men's work. So we end up
Yes, exactly. The two of you are doing work like profound work in the world. So tell us about your book. Tell us about your group, Rising Woman, and Becoming the One.
The book
And then we'll go into the
is
tenets of it. Yeah.
sounds great. The book is it's called Becoming the One, and it's a bit of my story, a little bit about where I came from and my journey through childhood trauma and abandonment and very unsafe, unhealthy relationships as a result of that early conditioning into healing and through the portal of learning conscious relationship. And so it takes you on this journey of looking at your own relationship patterns, understanding your own wounding with your mother and father, recontacting that divine inner mother and father, and healing your relationship patterns through transformation rather than trying to get rid of parts of yourself. So it's really rooted in self-acceptance and self-awareness. And I wrote the book because it's sort of the journey that I had to go through encapsulated to help people hopefully skip some of the pain that I had to go through to gather those lessons. Of course, we all have to endure our own painful experiences to learn, but there are pathways that we can take, and there's information that we can gather along the way that can support us. And so I created that book in order to help people who perhaps are exhausted with their relationship patterns, or are feeling heartbroken and don't know where to turn, or feel that their relationships continuously turn into chaos and upheaval. And that was my experience as well. So that's the premise of the book. And Becoming the One, the title, is really meant to sort of reference how in our culture we've had this idea of finding the one, and how we have this belief that there is one person out there who's going to sweep us off our feet and make everything all better. And while I believe that there are people who are perfect for us, there's no such thing as just one magical person. And it's certainly not going to be the person you meet that changes your relationship patterns. It's going to be you, and then you and them together in the dynamic. And so we're taking away the pressure in some ways of having there be the one, so that we can really be present with the one that we're with, and also be really present with ourselves.
It's so much of a journey of getting to know yourself on the deepest level, and understanding yourself. Like you said, I think so much of us, so many of us, we're living with, we have patterns that we developed early on that we are repeating, and it's the integration. So that was that was a really great lesson that I learned from listening and reading your book.
Nice.
So you say that deep in our hearts, we all want the experience of true love. Yet romantic love is not what defines us or makes us whole. This is why my response to anyone who's seeking love is always first seek within. And that's what so much of this book is about the inner work that we all, if we really want to have fulfilling partnerships or relationships in general, it's doing the work inside of ourselves, right?
Absolutely. And there is this pendulum swing where we have gone to the other end of hyper-independence, where we are told that we maybe should be needless or that we should have it all figured out inside and that all we need is to love ourselves and then we will no longer yearn for partnership. And I also don't believe that to be true. We're born to be in relationship. We are wired to be in connection, and we're wired for touch and safety through group and community. And at the same time, we can't really be in authentic relationship with others if we don't know who we are, if we are not fully expressed, and if we're not authentic in our voice. And so the first prerequisite to being in those relationships that you yearn for is to get into right relationship with you, to know who you are, and to unapologetically claim what it is that you want and desire. And so that is where we go in this book. We go on a journey of discovering what parts of you have you let die, what parts of you have you relegated to the basement because that's what you had to do in order to survive or to earn love, and what parts of you need to be reawakened and welcomed home so that the right kinds of people, the people that you really yearn to be in deep relationship with, can discover you and can celebrate you. And we can only do that when we're in celebration of ourselves. And so it is a process of returning to our authentic voice as well.
So you share so much about your story, which that I really believe that how we learn from each other, so much of how we learn from each other is from sharing our experiences and then saying, well, this is what I learned. And this is how my reflection of that and my perspective of it led me to where I am now. Like, sharing our stories is so very important. So tell us about your journey. I know there's a lot that you share in the book, and I don't expect you to go through everything, but it was so you were married. First of all, your childhood, you were in and out of foster homes. Can you share about your story, please, with us? And then, at 26, that's really and you did so much work in between the time that after your first marriage and then you meeting Ben. That was a dense amount of time, energy spent on your own healing. So I'd just love to hear more about that too.
And it's funny, you can't even really call it a marriage. The previous, it was, yes, legally, technically we got married.
Yes.
We were in our 20s and it wasn't like he proposed and we were like in this romantic love where we decided we're going to have a wedding and be married. It was much more strategic than that. We were from different countries and we wanted to see if we could make it work. And that was the only way. And so we were like, okay, well, let's get married. And we weren't even really happy about it. We were kind of devastated. And I don't know, it was wild. The things that you do when you have to live out a certain life path and a certain karma with somebody. And you look back and you're like, why did I do that? I knew all along. But if I hadn't done that and if I hadn't experienced that pain, then I probably wouldn't be here now experiencing my greatest joy. And so I'm grateful. But it's always funny to look back. But I did start out on a rough path, right? I had a very young mom struggling with severe mental health issues, trauma, very, very deep PTSD, alcoholism, addiction, and overall just no emotional capacity whatsoever, right? She didn't have the privilege of being mothered herself. And so her just keeping me alive was such a blessing, and really I'm grateful to her for all that she did, because she did not have any sort of teacher or guide on how to be an adult or be a mother. But I was in and out of foster homes quite young, starting at around 3 years old. And by the time I was 12, I was on my own as a ward of the government. And then when I was 16, I moved out on my own officially and homeschooled myself and worked 2 jobs. And
wow, that right there is just amazing. Right?
Yeah.
To do that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, I've met so many people now. I guess maybe we just attract each other, but I've met quite a few people who have a very similar story. And It sounds sometimes like this very unique story, but actually the more that I share, the more I receive messages from people who feel so seen in what I went through and feel that their life path was very, very similar. And so that also reminds me that it's important to share, because ultimately this mission is not about me. But when I remind people that, there's other people out there who have been through this, who are now living fulfilling lives and have happy marriages, albeit we have our bumps and our struggles, nobody is perfect, but all in all, life is really good and it's possible to get there. And so that's really what I'm a champion for, is reminding those people who are perhaps wired for chaos and turbulence and all they know is destruction, and that there's another way.
There is another way. And so can you give us just a little taste of all of the work that you did, that you do, you do teach somatic therapy practices, healing in their book, and different ways that we can, it is a journey, like you said, of healing. So tell us about your healing journey and how that, like, you did so many things, right? But can you just give us you were on a mission to heal yourself.
It was a mission. I was in a lot of pain. I was in a lot of pain. And when we're in a lot of pain, there are really two pathways that we can take. And one is just absolute collapse and bitterness and resignation. And the other is we have to find our fire. We have to claim that element of fire, and we have to forge ahead, and we have to do the work. And that is what I chose. And so I tried everything. And I really at first started deep in ceremony. So I worked with a lot of plant medicine. I did a lot of ceremony every week. I did a lot of breath work. I did rebirthing, which is quite an intense form of breath work. Not always actually recommended either. Not necessarily something that I would recommend to anyone, but it's what I did. And I also did a lot of deep transpersonal therapy, shadow work, mother wounding work, father wounding work, ancestral clearing work, working with shamanic healers, literally everything you could possibly do. That is all that I did. Every day, all day, I was focused on my healing. So if I wasn't doing some sort of practice or ritual, I was writing, or I was creating processes for myself, which a lot of them are in the book too, like writing letters to myself and creating containers to vision what it is that I wanted to experience in the future. And I had planned to be single for many years. And then I met Ben, and we met when he was 30, and he had planned to be single until he was 35. And he ended up getting married at 35 instead. And so we actually met quite fast after I broke up with my partner. And I resisted it quite intensely at first, because I felt like it was fast, and I had planned to be single and to just go on this journey. But, we don't get to choose when our partners walk through the door. And we also don't get to choose when they exit, even if we're in a deep committed relationship. And so I said yes and surrendered. And here we are now, about 8 years in, and we have a daughter, and it's wonderful, but didn't plan for it. I planned for him, but I didn't plan for him in the timing that he came.
I think that is the beauty, so much beauty and mystery of life, in that our souls and God, the source, has this greater plan for our lives. So there's like fate, right? And then there's ways that we can get to that fate. Like you can go quicker. I think, I don't know. I don't have the answers, but it's like, you can possibly hasten the process of getting to what's good for you by going down that road. Like you said, I think that is like a great lesson right there, is that you were so dedicated to your healing. Like you were on a mission to heal yourself, and that sped up the process or the timing on you meeting Ben. What do you think?
Well, it did for me. And that's the thing, is I want to be mindful too for those people who are doing all of the work and have maybe even done even more work than I did. And then they're single for 7 years and they're like, well, what gives? Right. And that's,
so what is your advice on that? Or what is your perspective on that?
Well, timing is not up to us.
Right.
And that's true for everything, right? And even, I've done a lot of work in the spirit baby realm in the last couple of years. And I have friends who have been communicating with their spirit babies for the last 6 years, and they are still struggling to conceive them, but they have that connection. They know they're spirit babies and they're ready. but they're not in charge of the timing. And so they just continue to have that connection in that relationship. And the same goes for being with a life partner or any other thing that we want to create. We don't know when it's going to happen, and we don't know why it's not going to happen on our timeline either. And there is some misconception around the whole manifestation rhetoric.
Let's talk about that. Yes.
We believe that, you know, all you have to do is just do the work, and you just have to think positively, and then you'll manifest it. And of course, I to an extent, I believe in manifestation, but I also know that we just don't have the kind of control that we think we do. So for me, it's more about having a relationship with spirit and then trust and surrender in the process, and just really being present with what is right now and seeing what is here for me now in this moment, you know, and allowing the moment to be healing for us and allowing joy to be present in the space, even if we aren't receiving exactly what it is that we want in this moment, knowing that life is a mystery still. It's still a mystery, and we don't get to decide ultimately how our life is going to look. And some of us get exactly what we want, and some of us don't. There are plenty of beautiful friends that I have who I'm just in awe of, and they want the family, and they want the kids and the husband, and they want all of those things, and they don't have them, and they're, you know, starting to enter their 40s, and they're grieving. They're going through this midlife crisis where they have to reevaluate their identity and who they are and what they thought their life would look like. And that happens too. And that's not because you didn't manifest properly. It's because life is a mystery, and nobody knows, and nobody can tell you why. And it's definitely not your fault. It just is. That is the way that life is going. And I personally believe that there's a little mixture of willpower, and then there's a little bit of free will, and then there's surrender. And we have to bring all of those to the table when we're approaching life. We need the willpower to endure when things are not going our way. And we need to remember that we have free will when things seem destined and we're looking to chart a new path. And then we have to surrender to whatever is given to us in every moment. And I just think sometimes the whole manifestation idea in general can be harmful if we hold on to it too tightly, you know?
I agree. Yeah. So you talk about, and this, I just thought this is such a great way to put it, like self-sacrifice for love, right? And how this can happen to any of us. You say, if we are afraid to be single because we think it has something to do with our worth, then we're more likely to settle for crumbs, engage in self-sabotage or self-abandon, to hold on to a relationship that doesn't serve our highest potential. I think this is just really prevalent in our society, right? We don't, and maybe, and I think we a lot of us don't realize when we're in unhealthy relationships, but it is this self-sacrificing. Can you talk about that, Sheleana? How you must see this a lot in your work, where people are like, I lost myself. I don't know how it happened. It happened slowly. Or it's like, I settled and I should have known better. Like I knew, but I still did it anyway.
Totally. And in those moments, I'm like, just give yourself grace, because
Right.
I've done that many times, and that's what brought me here. And so I don't wish that I had made a different decision, because if I had, where would I be? I love my life now. Hopefully, if we're awake and we do the practice of remaining present, then we get to that place where even all of the pain in our history has carried us to a place where we are really grateful and happy to be now. And for those of us who are right in the middle of it, that might sound far-fetched, but as long as you are awake on the path, likely that is where you will find yourself. It might not look exactly the way you want it to look, but that's a different story. But yeah, it's just such a journey. It's such a journey, and we have to remember that life is going to carry us where it's going to carry us. And if we find ourselves in relationships that make us self-abandon, let's say, or cause us to lose ourselves, there's often two things going on. One is our own patterns from our family conditioning are activating. We're holding back in some way. And two, we have to ask ourselves, are we with somebody who is activating this in us and they're not actually willing to do the work? Or is this an opportunity to heal? What we tend to do in our culture is we enter these relationships, our family wounding is activated, we lose ourselves, and then we blame that other person as if they are to blame for us losing ourselves, for our own self-abandonment. We don't take responsibility for it. And we think, oh, well, I just can't be with that person because I can't be myself with them. But how often has that story repeated in your life? How many times have you said that? And where does that come from? Is that a familiar feeling or a familiar narrative? And often when we look back, that's how we learned to survive. That was a survival mechanism. And that's where we go back to what I was talking about earlier, which is that what are those parts that you had to let die or that you relegated to the basement of your own mind in order to receive love? What are we bringing back? We're not changing who we are. We're just welcoming parts home. Right? We're becoming more of ourselves. We're stepping more into our essence. And so what we're essentially doing is we're clearing away all the cobwebs and the electric fences, and we're taking the gates down. And we're, of course, having healthy boundaries. There's healthy boundaries that prevent us from just letting everybody in. But there's not such a crazy, jungle gym swamp to try to get through to our hearts. There's a clear path, and what the boundaries are, and there's ways to respect that path. But it's not painful or impossible to get to you. And that's the work that we're doing in all of this. And to remember that we should be able, if we are securely attached, to be in relationship with ourselves, to be at home in our own bodies, while also being in relationship with another. So I can be in relationship with myself, I can be in relationship with you, and then there's this other entity, which is our relationship. And those are three separate things. And it takes a lot of somatic practice, and it takes a lot of work for many of us to be able to maintain those boundaries in a healthy way, because so many of us learned to caretake or to hide or to contort ourselves in some way to win love or approval or to just say safe. And so what we're really doing is we're relearning how to be in relationship with our truth and with our direct honesty and our desires, and with curiosity as well for the other person, so that we can learn about each other. And if we find that we are escaping or that we are hiding or that we are avoiding in some way, then sure, maybe the solution is to end the relationship, especially if you're younger and you're still out exploring. But if you're in a relationship where you really want this to work, then you can, likely, if you both want it to. And if that relationship isn't healthy, you can ask each other, well, what could we do to make it healthy? And that's, again, another skill that I think we're still learning in our culture. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, people didn't get divorced. They just stayed together, but they just stayed together in an unhappy state. Now we're in this other end where people really eject quite quickly, or they don't commit at all. And what I'm rooting for is this middle path where we do commit and we do go all the way.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. That's so well said. So can you talk to us about something that you identified in yourself, a pattern that you saw, or was just like an awareness that you recognized within yourself? It's a funny story, but it's in hindsight you laugh about it, but at the time it wasn't funny. It's not about the Nespresso, right? Yeah. And you talk about how you had said to Ben, you were talking about coffee machines. You're like, don't ever buy me an espresso. And lo and behold, Christmas, you open up and it's like, there's an espresso machine, and how you took that so incredible. I would feel the same way. I mean, you weren't listening, but you really internalized it as, can you talk to us about that? Mm-hmm. How you recognized within yourself later on, or not too far after, what was going on?
Yeah, it was, this was many years ago now. Gosh, that was a wild Christmas. I'll save the story if you want to read it in my book, but essentially we had a series of events where I had said something and then he had sort of done the opposite in the gift giving realm. And it's really not about the gift, of course. Like when I opened the card that he got me, I was overjoyed. I was like, oh my gosh, all I need is this card. It was just so beautifully written. I felt just, my heart was so open, so in love, so happy. And then I opened this big box, and it's an espresso, and I couldn't even fake being happy. And, now when we have processed this, we've talked about it actually on a podcast, just the two of us too, about how if that were to happen now, the response would be very different. And I'd be like, I love you, but I don't really like this, But at the time, we hadn't fully worked through some of these deeper issues, I guess you could say. This one particular issue of feeling unseen and unheard that I guess I was still carrying as a wound from my own childhood. And so when that happened, what it really evoked in me was this feeling of just not being seen, not being heard. And it really, really activated something in me. And it's not like this wasn't the first time either, right? Of course, there was kind of a buildup of a few things that had happened. And so finally, when this occurred, I just kind of had a meltdown.
Yeah.
And afterwards, when we processed it, it really came through. This is about this consistent theme for me. And I talk about this in my book, which is these emotional themes. What's the emotional theme? It's not so much the actual events that are going on in this current relationship that is the pattern, or it's not like, do all of your ex-partners look the same? Like that's not the pattern that we're looking for. What we're looking for is the emotional themes that we carry with us, and those current narratives of, I'm not enough, there's something wrong with me, I always attract people who cheat, or people don't listen, or I'm not respected, or whatever the narrative is. Those are the emotional themes that we're looking for. For me, it was, I'm not seen and I'm not heard. I'm not understood, and so it brought this beautiful opportunity for me to acknowledge that and to do some deeper work and some deeper healing on it. And that's the beauty of relationship, is that there's always something, there's always something that will arise in the space. And, I could have easily just made that all about him and held the grudge forever, or even ended the relationship. But we used it as a way to create opportunities for healing and for more wholeness within myself, right? Because what we want is to see those moments as healing moments, and then to actually move through them to the point where if the same theme were to arise again in the space, the story and the narrative would be different. And I would no longer feel that activation in my body and have that same reaction. And so that's, again, to where, doing the somatic work and working with our nervous system to become more securely attached comes in. Because the idea that we're always going to be triggered, or that, we're always going to be carrying the same story or the same trauma is not correct. We actually can heal that on a physical level and move that experience through the body so that, sure, we might have some thoughts or feelings about it, but we're not going to be activated anymore when it arises.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that is how you integrate. You're recognizing, oh, it's like almost like you take away, like you said, you're taking away the trigger. You're still aware that is like, you might have these thoughts. Like, tell us if has something come up recently that you can think of that may have triggered, or may have made you recall this feeling of not being seen or being heard, but you behave differently, or you like, how does that, now that you've done the healing around that, how is that?
I would say that probably happens all the time.
Yes.
But again,
right? Because it's something that's part, right? A part of you. I'm trying to understand, like, once you've healed that, how is it, your life is different now?
Well, ideally, when we do the actual healing work on a nervous system level, we aren't even noticing these things anymore as much because, like I said, it's not being activated, right? And so that's why I say, it probably happens every week, but my body's not reacting anymore. And so there are, of course, times still in my marriage, of course, where I'm having a hard time and I'm still having those thoughts of I want to eject from this, or I don't want to be in this relationship right now, or gosh, this guy's such a jerk, like I have those moments and he has those moments with me. That's marriage, we all have our shadow moments, but in general, I've experienced a shift in my own nervous system through doing the healing work where I don't have those same activations anymore. And if there's something that bothers me, I'm not going down a spiral with it, and so when we heal our nervous system, the nervous system is able to relax into secure attachment. And so we can say, okay, things are really hard right now. And I can acknowledge that, yeah, there's a part of me that wants to run, but actually I'm going to stay here and it's safe to do so. And it becomes easier to just stay in the game, so to speak, because our body is on board with us instead of feeling like we need to run away, which is something that I used to experience all the time. And I've written about this as the runner archetype or the survivor archetype, our instinct is to eject or to run and to just exit the dynamic or go and be alone, because all we can trust is ourselves. And ideally, when we've done the deeper healing work on a nervous system level, that sensation in the body reduces or completely goes away. And so we have a greater capacity to receive love, but also to just be in stable, healthy connection without needing to disrupt the homeostasis all of the time in order to feel something familiar.
Yeah. So in your book, you have these practices that we can all do, whether you're in a relationship or not, right? I think and if you're in a relationship, I think the healing is the life. This life is a healing journey. Period. That's just the way it goes. So tell us more about somatic healing. This is something that I'm learning a lot about, but I think a lot of our listeners don't know what that is. What does it mean?
Somatic just means body, right? And so what we're doing,
body
we're
work.
working with the body. Yeah, we're working with body memory. We're working with body intelligence. The body, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's probably the most famous book on this work. So certainly, it's a dense, heavy, very intense read, but it's been on the charts for years because it's just such an incredible resource for those who want to learn about this type of work. But ultimately what we're doing is we are healing at a nervous system level. So the body holds memory, it holds trauma, and we might be able to do all of the mindset work in the world, but if our body hasn't moved through the event, or our body hasn't had the opportunity to process the experience, then our body will still be in fight, flight, freeze, fawn. We're in some sort of state that doesn't allow us to react differently to the same type of stimulus. So what we're doing when we're doing somatic healing is we're actually processing things that we've been holding without having to talk about it, and through movement or through sound and through gentle touch. And it's quite subtle, and it's not going to blast your channels open, and it's not this intense experience. And that's the beauty of it, is we have been conditioned, especially in some of the therapy circles that people attend, where they believe that, it needs to be this big experience, like a big breathwork event or something where you're going to just blast your channels open and have this vision come through, and, you're going to see God. And with somatic work, it's often the opposite. It's very subtle. You almost don't notice anything. But what's happening is that slowly your nervous system is retraining to be secure and to also not be holding on to anything that needs to be processed. And so also it's about learning how to be present in the moment, where if there's something to process, that we don't skip that we either process it right there in the moment, or that we come back to it in that same day, so that we're not building up memory in our cells that's going to impede our ability to be fully expressed in our relationships.
Right. I had a conversation yesterday with Kelsey Grant, and and she talked to us about the work that she does with people around cleaning your emotional pipes. Mm-hmm. And it's just, and you don't really know what's locked in there a lot of times, like you said, but it does make a profound impact if you are able to clear out what you don't even maybe know you're holding on to. That's the thing about somatic work. I thought about when you were talking about this, I was thinking about my experience. A few years ago, I was in Vancouver doing a 5 rhythms workshop with one of my dear friends, Anne-Marie Hogia. And she does I had never done this before. It was wild and just out of my realm of what I was used to. But we danced for 3 days, just turned the music on, and she's leading us into whatever your body wants to do. And at times I was in joy, and the music was, pumping, you're feeling good. But there were times where I just had to sit down and cry. I had no idea why I was crying. And I didn't know what I was experiencing. And your mind can't make sense of it some of the time. And it's not meant to, right?
Yeah, we're not meant to understand everything, and we don't need to. And it can be really healing to go to the roots of your relationship patterns and understand them in the mind. And I've done a lot of that work, and I guide people through that work. And I also remind people that ultimately the thing that matters is that we move this out of your system. And if you don't remember, that's okay. And you don't have to have all the answers. You really don't. Your body will lead you if you allow. And we so often resist being in the body. And that's why we have so much chronic pain and dis-ease and discomfort. And, I went through that myself, where I had severe chronic pain and severe autoimmunity for years that actually healed through doing somatic work, because I was so afraid to be in my body that my body was keeping the score, so to speak, right? It was holding on to all of that trauma and that pain that I wasn't able to process and acknowledge. And so as I did that, my body transformed, my pain reduced, and I had more capacity to feel all of the feelings, including joy and celebration and peace, which are the things that we might not realize that we are afraid to feel, but we really can be. So often, if we are conditioned for chaos or dysfunction, we may actually have a cap on how much joy we can experience. We might feel awkward when everybody's celebrating around us and we're in a crowd, and we might feel embarrassed to clap or to sing, or we might not want to get up and dance, and we might feel frozen. Well, why is that? Well, that's a limit on joy. And that's a somatic block as well. And it's not just part of your personality. It's not who you are. It's a separation between you and others, and this feeling of being separate from. And so these are all things that can give us information about where we are at and what we need in order to open ourselves to the fullness of life.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Something just really clicked for me right now around all of that, what you just said, because it's like, this makes sense to me how, it's like if you have been through, if you're holding so much trauma in your body, you're unconsciously like disconnecting yourself. Like you've got the memories, you've got of that, but you don't want to experience it with your fullness of yourself. So you're disconnecting, but you're not doing it on purpose. So that really what it means. That's what it means to be out of body, right? Yeah. And what you're helping people do with your work and with your book is these rituals and these practices to really be and clear what's going
come
on.
Home to yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. So tell us about you. I recommend everybody read your book and listen to your book. I think your voice is so healing. I think it's just the audio is incredible. So tell us about the work you do with Rising Woman, and you're doing online. People can do online work with you as well, right?
Yeah. Right now, the only way to work with me directly is to do my program called Freedom from Relationship Anxiety, and that's a 6-week container where we do some breathwave ceremonies, which is a very, very gentle form of breath. And also 6 sessions with me. And we do a combination of somatic experiencing work with practitioners that I have brought in to do that supportive work. Because I'm not yet a certified somatic experiencing practitioner, which is Peter Levine's body of work, which I really admire. So I've brought in some friends who are doctors to support that. And then we also do weekly calls and practices to heal from these anxious avoidant tendencies that we might be wrapped up in our relationships. Many people who are doing the anxious avoidant dance, many people who are chasing, many people who are desperate for love and attention from the wrong places, and also people who are just in healthy relationships and cannot relax and be present because they are so conditioned to fear the worst or for waiting for the other shoe to drop. So wow. And that is the program that I built actually about 4 months ago. And I love running that program. It's so amazing to see the transformation that can occur and the aha moments that happen while we're really getting into our bodies together, and also practicing vulnerability and connection, because we do these calls where we do breakouts and we talk about just things that are vulnerable to us in a safe container, and we practice being seen and heard and also listening. So that's what I'm up to these days. And I also have a journal for Becoming the One that's being published in September. So that'll be out by the end of September. So I think the link for pre-order is available now. So
when does your opening of your sorry, you said what is it called again, please, Sheleana? It's
Freedom from Relationship Anxiety.
Yes. When is that opening?
The next one is July 3rd. Yeah.
July 3rd, very soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, about a month from now, just under a month from now, we'll open the doors again. And because the program is live, we close the doors and we build a wait list, and then we open up every few months, like every 3 or 4 months right now. That could change, of course, but right now that's how we're doing it. And I've just really enjoyed, since having my daughter, working directly with people and with groups again. I've just had this new energy for people, because seeing the innocence and the tenderness and the vulnerability in my own baby just reminds me so much that all of us that come through these doors for healing were once that innocent child. And it connects me to people's hearts even deeper now as a mother. And so I've just really loved having the opportunity to run these sessions. It's been really great.
Wow. Well, I'm just so honored that we share this time together, and I've been learning from you, and I will continue to do so. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Robin.
Please visit realloveready.com to become a member of our community. Submit your relationship questions for our podcast experts at reallovereadypodcast@gmail.com. We read everything you send. Be sure to rate and review this podcast. Your feedback helps us get you the relationship advice and guidance you need. The Real Love Ready podcast is recorded and edited by Maya Anstey. Transcriptions by otter.ai and edited by Maya Anstey. We at Real Love Ready acknowledge and express gratitude for the Coast Salish people, the stewards of the land on which we work and play, and encourage everyone listening to take a moment to acknowledge and express gratitude for those that have stewarded and continue to steward the land that you live on as well.